Alright, so here's the results of the 2015 False Hero and Role Model Survey. Brian Cox, number 1. Had nothing to do with me. Right, I'm going to read out some comments. These are Rich Planet viewers' comments. They're not my comments about these fake heroes. Brian Cox. I'm cleverer than you lot, and I'm telling you in a pally way that everything is as the science book says it is. This viewer says, his statement about intelligent life and that in his opinion there has never been intelligent life in the universe because we would have heard from them stunned me to the core. Next viewer says, he made dismissive, smug comments about UFO sightings with his usual stupid, effeminate smirk on his face. This viewer says, I would like to nominate Brian Cox because that's what I was told to say by a subliminal message on some TV program I was watching. Also, he's a complete arse. But for me, it's what Brian Cox doesn't talk about that makes him subversive. Yeah? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about the most important book written this century, Where Did the Towers Go, by former Professor of Engineering Mechanics, Dr. Judy Wood, which proves that the World Trade Center towers didn't even hit the ground. They were turned to dust in midair, which could not have been caused by aeroplanes. Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about Flight 175 on 9/11 and the totally impossible physics of Flight 175? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about the technology of cold fusion, which was suppressed in 1989, and if it hadn't been suppressed, it could have gotten the world off fossil fuels? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about over-unity devices, such as the Bedini motor? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about anti-gravity research? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about the Byfield-Brown effect, which some say has been developed into anti-gravity propulsion? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about theoretical physicist Mikhail Alcubierre's mathematical model, where space around an object is shifted so that the object would arrive at its destination faster than light would in normal space? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about the thousands of pilots that have reported seeing UFOs? And why doesn't Brian Cox talk about the evidence of Professor Emil Schweitzer, Belgium's top radar expert, who examined radar data from a UFO? The UFO travelled horizontally, did a right angle turn and went up vertically, and at the point of the turn pulled a corner of 30 G. Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about images allegedly coming back from the Opportunity rover, which experts say is a crinoid fossil? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about the structure of the quantum vacuum? Why doesn't Brian Cox talk about researchers such as Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, who have scientifically studied phenomena such as psychic phenomena? Well, the reason is because Brian Cox's job is to keep the public's mind focused on a GCSE level science. That's it. And to fool people into thinking there's nothing worth knowing in science outside of that, when the reality is there's a vast amount that has been covered up. And just for your own entertainment, here's the man himself.
Students from Highbury Primary School ask, when something enters a black hole, what happens next?
Now that's a brilliant question. The quick answer is, we don't know.
Now, dark matter. Lots of students have been asking the simple question, what is it?
Great question, don't know.
Noah from TAFE SA asks, is maths the language of the universe?
Yes. Why that is the case, we don't know. Being baffled is a great position to be in, I think.
Absolutely.
And then you go and try and unbaffle yourself. That's the definition of science, I would say.
Amina from Tilapia Park asks, how is the human brain linked to the cosmos?
What is it to be me then, to be you? What is it to be alive and conscious? And the answer is, we don't know.
Mandy from Darwin High School and Matthew from Gungahlin College ask, will we ever be able to travel faster than the speed of light?
Well, Mandy and Matthew, I think the answer is no.
Now, the idea of life on other planets. Students from Highbury Primary School ask, is there life on other planets? Aliens even?
It's as I said at the start, it's one of the questions I really want to know, and I think we might answer very soon. Obviously, if there isn't any, we'll never answer the question. As I mentioned earlier, the life on Mars, we're looking for that very seriously. Why? Because we think there's a chance that certainly a chance that it did exist at some point in the past, because we know water flowed over the surface of Mars. But we also strongly suspect that there's water below the surface of Mars now. And so any microbes that evolved perhaps many billions of years ago could have survived subsurface. So we may find life on Mars. So I think that's potentially one of the great discoveries that. It's a guess again, it's not a particularly scientific thing to say. The reason we build big spacecraft to go and land on Mars is because we want to look. So we don't know. If we knew, we wouldn't go and build a spacecraft to go and have a look.
Otto from Carlingford High School asks, following the discovery of the Higgs boson at CERN, what's the next great big experiment for physics?
Well, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN will continue to be one of the next great experiments. The thing about the Higgs boson is, yes, we've discovered it, or we've discovered a Higgs boson. But now what we have to do is we have to understand it. We have to do experiments. We have to characterize it, understand how it works precisely, understand whether it's the only one. There are theories of particle physics that suggest there isn't just one Higgs boson. There might be more than one. There might be 5 of them. They might have different properties. So which one is it? And the answer to that is we're not sure. We don't know.
All right. Now remember what he said there. He said we might find microbes on Mars. So according to him, there's no life on Mars. And that links into something I'm going to talk about in part 2. All right, looking at number 2 on our